Happening now, breaking news. Violent protests, running street battles breaking out of Baltimore after the funeral for Freddie Gray. Rioters pelting police with rocks and smashing a squad car. At least 7 police officers are now down. They're wounded. We have complete coverage coming up.
I'm a city councilman in the district.
You're a city councilman. What is it? As you're watching this, tell me what this means for your city.
Cease!
What do you mean?
Cease fire!
When you're watching this go on, does it break your heart to see this happen?
Oh, definitely. I mean, what it is young boys, the young folks of this community showing decades old of anger, frustration for a system has failed them. I mean, this is bigger than Freddie Gray. This is about the socioeconomics of poor urban America. And, you know, these young guys are frustrated, they're upset, and unfortunately, they're displaying it in a very destructive manner. You know, when folks are undereducated, unfortunately, they don't have the same intellectual voice to express it the way other people do, and that's what we see through the violence today.
We just watched this liquor store being looted, and there's a bunch of folks running in and out of there.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with nothing.
What's wrong with that? The police are all the way down there.
Yeah.
You're a city council member, is that right?
Is it right for people to loot? No. I mean, I think you've missed everything I tried to articulate to you. What I've said is everything out here has happened wrong. The violence is wrong. That's never acceptable. Understanding that there's a symptom of something that's going on here. And what I'm trying to articulate to you is when you look at communities like this in urban America, lack of education, lack of commercial development, lack of opportunities. It's the social economics of it. It has nothing to do with West Baltimore or this particular corner in Baltimore. This could erupt anywhere in socially, economically deprived America.
Well, we've certainly seen this in other cities. Obviously, Ferguson comes to mind.
We also see it at rallies like at Kentucky. When Kentucky lost that basketball game, we see crowds that loot and that flip over cars and stuff. But but unfortunately, you know, all of the 95% of the positive rallying that has been occurring here in Baltimore, the national media is going to focus on this, and that's the problem.
So what are the legitimate grievances in your mind that folks have about being here? Is it against the police? Is it against the poverty?
I think this is a culmination of a lot of different things. You know, decades old of failed policies. You know, decades old of lack of development for these communities. I mean, it's a lot that pours into it, and these young boys are speaking tonight, unfortunately, in a very wrong way.
Do you have any idea why, as we're seeing what's going on here, and obviously you've got the police who have now backed off, any idea why?
We asked them to back off. The minute this community came together, we talked to the police, we told them we would be able to kind of talk to the young guys out here, and we asked them to back up, and they did it. It worked out. So
it worked out, but the liquor store's still being looted.
That was best pass. And at this point, this is not productive.
But at the same time, it is as necessary for me to be as vigorous in condemning the conditions which cause persons to feel that they must engage in riotous activities as it is for me to condemn riots.
Who is the big loser in the Baltimore riots? The answer is the African American community. And that is the subject of this evening's Talking Points memo. In Baltimore, the situation is dire. 63% of the population there is African American, 63%. Unemployment rate, 8.4%. And blacks control the city. Black mayor. 9 out of the city council members are black. Only 6 are white. So African Americans calling most of the shot. Police chief's black. Despite that, 24% of Baltimore residents live below the poverty line. 24%. But the median income for Maryland is $73,500, the highest in the nation. But for Baltimoreans, median household income is a whopping $32,000 less than the state, at just over $41,000 a year.
Also, you see how interconnected things are, how connected the performance of the school system is to the culture of the corner, or where parenting comes in, and where the lack of meaningful work. All these things, you know, the decline of industry suddenly interacts with the paucity and sort of fraud of public education in inner city.
The city's not prospering. The facts then dictate that racial persecution really isn't the problem in Baltimore.
These really are the excess people in America. Our economy doesn't need them. We don't need 10 or 15% of our population, and certainly the ones that are undereducated, that have been ill-served by an inner-city school system, that have been unprepared for the technocracy of the modern economy. We pretend to need them. We pretend to educate the kids. We pretend that we're actually including them in the American ideal, but we're not.
That mother's name is Toya Graham. We're hoping she'll come on the Factor tomorrow night. And she knows firsthand that the destruction of Baltimore last night and black crime in general has set that city back decades. I mean, who is going to invest or start a business in the poor precincts of Baltimore? Who? That means good jobs will not come to those neighborhoods. So the big loser in the Baltimore riots are those that live in the poor neighborhoods, primarily African Americans. These idiotic thugs rioting and looting are hurting their own people. And because the entire world sees pictures of blacks rampaging, all African Americans are affected.
The drug trade is an inverted form of capitalism to pacify these people who don't have any economic...
Absolutely. In some ways, it's the most destructive form of welfare that we've established, which is the illegal drug trade in these neighborhoods. It's basically like opening up a Beth Steel in the middle of the South Bronx or in West Baltimore and saying, and you guys are all steel workers. To say no, just say no. That's our answer to that. The economic model does not work. And if it was, by the way, if it was chewing up white folk, it wouldn't have gone on for as long as it did. School test scores, crime stats, arrest reports, arrest stats, anything that a politician can run on, anything that somebody can get a promotion on. And as soon as you invent that statistical category, 50 people in that institution will be at work trying to figure out a way to make it look as if progress is actually occurring when actually no progress is. And this comes down to Wall Street. I mean, they used to ride around Baltimore under one administration and say, if we can make 54 arrests a day, we'll break this. We'll have an all-time record for drug arrests. Some of the arrests, well, it was people sitting on their stoops and loitering in a drug-free zone. That's actually meaning you were sitting on your own steps on a summer day. The same game is played everywhere, but nobody's actually in the business of doing what the institution's supposed to do.
Why don't the policies change?
There's no political capital in it. There really isn't. The fear of being called soft on crime, soft on drugs, the paranoia that's been induced. Listen, if you could be draconian and reduce drug use by locking people up, you might have an argument. But we are the jailingest country on the planet right now. And 2 million people in prison. When I started as a police reporter, 34% of the federal inmate population was violent offenders. It's now like 7-8%.
Well, what about the police in Baltimore? Well, black crime there is out of control. City has the 5th highest murder rate in the country. 90% of homicide victims in Baltimore are black. 90% of murder suspects are black. 90% of those arrested for robbery are black. About 90% of those arrested for aggravated assault are black. And arrests for all offenses in the city of Baltimore, Maryland, 85% black. Again, the black population is 63%. With so many African Americans committing crimes, there's going to be tension between the cops and the community. It's inevitable. Honest people know that.
It's also clear from your work that you think the drug war has destroyed the policeman.
Absolutely. That's the saddest thing in a way, is that, again, because the stats mean nothing, because a drug arrest in Baltimore means nothing, real police work isn't being done. In my city, the arrest rates for all major felonies have declined precipitously over the last 20 years, from murder to rape to robbery to assault. Because to solve those crimes requires retroactive investigation. They have to be able to do a lot of things in terms of gathering evidence that is substantive and meaningful police work. All you have to do to make a drug arrest is go in a guy's pocket. You don't even need probable cause anymore in Baltimore. The guy who solves a rape or a robbery or a murder, he has one arrest stat. He's going to court one day. The guy who has 40, 50, 60 drug arrests, even though they're meaningless arrests, even though there's no place to put them in the Maryland prison system, he's going to go to court 40 or 50 or 60 times. Ultimately, when it comes time to promote somebody, they look at the police computer, they'll look and they'll say, this guy's made 40 arrests last month. You only made one. He's the sergeant, or that's the lieutenant. So the guys who basically play the stat game, they get promoted.
If our society really wanted to solve the problem, we could. It's just it would require everybody saying this is important, this is significant. And that we don't just pay attention to these communities when a CVS burns. And we don't just pay attention when a young man gets shot or has his spine snapped.
It can be used either constructively or destructively. And I'm absolutely convinced that the forces of ill will in our nation, the extreme righteous in our nation, have often used time much more effectively than the forces of goodwill. And it may well be that we will have to repent in this generation, not merely for the vitriolic words of the bad people and the violent actions of the bad people, but for the appalling silence and indifference of the good people who sit around and say, wait on time. Somewhere we must come to see that social progress never rolls in on the wheels of inevitability. It comes through the tireless efforts and the persistent work of dedicated individuals, and without this hard work, time itself becomes an ally of the primitive forces of social stagnation.
When individuals get crowbars and start prying open doors to loot, they're not protesting. They're not making a statement. They're stealing. When they burn down a building, they're committing arson.
But in the final analysis, a riot is the language of the unheard. What is it that America has failed to hear? It has failed to hear that the plight of the Negro poor has worsened over the last few years. It has failed to hear that the promises of freedom and justice have not been met. And it has failed to hear that large segments of white society are more concerned about tranquility and the status quo than about justice, equality, and humanity. And so in a real sense, our nation's summers of riots are caused by our nation's winters of delay. And as long as America postpones justice, we stand in the position of having these recurrences of violence and riots over and over again. Social justice and progress are the absolute guarantors of riot prevention.